everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today we are going to be discussing the novel The Awakening by Kate Chopin. The book is set in the 1890s in Louisiana. It takes place on the Grand Isle and in the French Quarter. I am Mady.
I'm Carly.
Carly, how would you rate the book, and did you find any parts of it to be surprising?
Well, I actually enjoyed the book for most parts of it. I found it to be quite interesting how it showed the perspective of a non-traditional woman in this time period in the 1800s. Most women during this time were stay-at-home moms, and they catered to all their family's needs, but Edna was quite the opposite of that, as she broke free from her family and followed her true self more and more throughout the book when she discovered what her motives were and what she wanted to do in life.
I agree. I think the novel was very interesting, and surprisingly I liked it. I know a lot of people disliked the book, but I thought it was very interesting in that you don't usually see what goes on in the 1890s. Most people don't write about that time period. So I think it was a very interesting book, and it showed that even at that time, women didn't want to be just a housewife and take care of the kids and take care of the husband and be an example for the husband and their family. But it was very interesting. Even the end was very surprising, I thought.
Yeah, and that's definitely one reason why The Awakening became a banned book at this time. It was a really risky book for Kate to write. She faced a lot of criticism for it because she showed a different side of women that was more taboo and not spoken about. For example, Edna's more sexual side and the way she betrayed her husband in the book. So she did face a lot of backlash for it, but it was definitely a big step in literature and for women when the book was released.
Yeah, she definitely stepped out of the social norms and the norms just of everything, because even then women were seen to be a very specific way, and the author Kate went completely against that, and she showed that there's other ways for women to live, and I think it opened the eyes of women of that time period, and even now that things were different and things can be different. A lot of people thought that Edna was crazy for going and living the way she was, and it was very risky for her to do everything that she did.
Yeah, it was definitely all really surprising. And when we look at the way that women were treated and living in this book, we can view it with the critical theory, the feminist criticism. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that it definitely shows that in this novel, women were expected to be a certain way. They most definitely represented their husbands. I mean, when Edna decided to go out and get her own home, and she wrote a letter to her husband saying, I've decided to do this, I don't live here anymore. Her husband's idea, he wasn't very upset that she left. He was more upset of how would society view this? How would people think? What would they think? How is this going to affect me in the business world? Not necessarily oh no, why are you leaving? I love you. No, it was more, how could you do this to my reputation? It was very much women upheld the reputation of the men because they were expected to give off that they were their property.
Yeah, definitely. And we can't really blame Leonce for his character because that's just the way life was then. But now we can definitely see the Ron in Leonce's actions and his feelings when Edna started to change in the book. Yeah, the relationship definitely was really unhealthy, and that's one reason why Edna was so trapped and she was so depressed in the beginning before she started to fall in love with Robert and break free for herself. Another way we can view feminist criticism is how unfairly women were represented. In the beginning, Edna judged other women when they would talk about their sexual lives and just all those unspoken things at the time. But as the book progressed, Edna realized that was just so wrong, and she was free, and it was okay for women to be free.
Yeah, and we see that in the beginning that she thought, why would these women speak of this stuff, at the Grand Isle? And she thought it was very crazy. But then later in the novel, we see that you know, she found that it was okay for her to feel that way and for her to think that kind of stuff. And I think another crazy thing about this novel is that she didn't have her own money when she was with Leonce. Like, basically, if she wanted to get anything, she had to ask him, and everything was seen that she wasn't her own person, she was his person. And then later, when she bought herself the apartment with the money she made from her paintings, it showed that, you know, women don't have to live the way that men want them to, and I think it helped her, as well as the other women in the French Quarter and in the Grand Isle, see that there's another way of life besides the one that their husbands create for them.
Yeah, definitely. And another way that Edna went against the social expectations of women is the way she sexually expressed herself. In the beginning, she definitely judged other women for their sexual lives, but she went on to grow from that, and she became more open about that topic as well. At the time, sex was considered very taboo, but it can be inferred from some of Kate's detailing in the book that Edna might have even been a prostitute, such as when Robert left on those whims and she was alone in her apartment. It was said in the book that several men were in and out of her apartment, and that definitely shows how Edna grew as a person and went against the expectations of women and was just free, and she felt like she could do whatever she wanted. And you can't blame her for that, because that was her decision and that was the way she wanted to live her life.
Of course, she lived a very sheltered life, the way that Leonce had protected her in the way that she did everything. And you can definitely see that later on in the novel, she didn't see a problem with adultery. I mean, she went on to have a relationship with a Robin, and she made that relationship with Robert. I mean, her and Leonce never really got a divorce, and she was still going on and having these relationships with these men, and that was very taboo for the time, that women didn't do that. I mean, now it's not necessarily common, but you see it more often in today's society, but back then it was very risky. It was very crazy for women to branch out and do stuff like that, but she really didn't see a problem with it. I mean, Robert, he obviously did, because that's why he left and went to Mexico, because he knew that he could never have a relationship with her, no matter what his feelings were.
Yeah, but we can still thank Robert for his character in the book, because I think the only reason that Edna grew so much as a character is because of Robert's contribution. In the beginning, you could definitely call him more of a womanizer. He definitely was just trying to take advantage of Edna when they were at the Grand Isle, just trying to get with her for her body. But later on, he realized that they were falling in love, and that was definitely a big step forward in the book, because then they both realized how much they were trapped in just the societal norms and expectations of that time, especially Edna, of course.
Yeah, because we later see that, I mean, they obviously both cared for each other very much, but it was just harder for them to have that relationship because of the time period, and divorce was seen to be as this huge issue, and obviously Leonce and Edna were not happy together, and they chose to stay together because what would society think if they separated? What would everyone think? You know, and it was a very big issue.
Yeah, and there's honestly ways you could view Robert as a bad and a good person, because without Robert, Edna wouldn't have grown in the book, but he also definitely treated Edna unfairly, as I said before, when he was just trying to get with Edna for the wrong reasons. But then in the end, he just kind of left on a whim constantly without a true explanation. He would just leave a simple note with several words on it, and that's obviously no way to treat anyone, let alone a woman you're falling in love with.
Of course, and I mean, he did help her grow. He helped her to see that the ocean wasn't this horrible thing. You know, she then realized the ocean is actually this very freeing place to go, and it was so magical in the way that everything moved. But I mean, you can definitely sort of blame him for the way that she kind of left her husband and went against societal norms, because she probably wouldn't have done that had he not showed up. But at the same time, he helps her see that there's more to life than just what Leonce had prepared for her and had made a life for her. And, he, of course, took advantage of her in the beginning and then later fell in love, like Carly said. But he helped Edna become the person that she was in the end before she committed suicide. And I think that he honestly had a part in that. Because although it doesn't ever say that he died or that he committed suicide, the note that he leaves the reader to infer that something happened to him, because he just leaves a note saying, goodbye, I love you, goodbye because I love you. Like, that's a very odd note to leave someone, whether or not you're leaving their home or just, killing yourself. It's a very odd thing for people to do. And I think that helped prompt Edna to go out and commit her suicide, just not because she was very and obviously unhappy throughout the novel.
Yeah, and I'd actually have to disagree with you on that point, Mady. I don't believe that Edna actually commits suicide when she went out into the ocean. I think she just drowned as anyone else would in the ocean. She went out too far and she couldn't swim. And I think that was definitely foreshadowed in the book. Earlier in the book, she was metaphorically compared with a parrot, and then when she moved into the apartment, she was compared to a pigeon, and then in the end, she was compared to a bird, like a lifeless bird with broken wings. And that was definitely a way to show that this drowning wasn't a choice. Her death was more accidental, considering no bird wants to fly with broken wings, no person wants to drown in the ocean.
I see what you're saying, but at the same time, it said in the novel that she went out to the point where she knew it before she almost drowned, but she was able to get herself turned around. And at that point, at the end of the novel, she didn't try to turn around. She didn't try to get herself out of the ocean. It said in the book, her legs were tired, she was tired, but she just stayed out there, and she just didn't try to fight the ocean back to get back to the shore. I think that, whether it was she had gone out there subconsciously to kill herself or whether she had just gone out for a swim and then it just happened accidentally, she most definitely did not fight back and try to keep herself from drowning.
Yeah, the book was definitely a cliffhanger, and most importantly, we can thank the author, Kate Chopin, for showing a different side of women during this time. And even though it was a big risky write for her, it definitely was a step forward in literature, and it's really important that we recognize the feminist criticism literary theory when viewing this book.
I agree.